became a symbol of mommy. And I guzzled it down, and then that sort of calmed me as I finished about the third quart, and the other was sort of spilling all over me. And so in a sense, I had symbolically sort of incorporated mommy, and now somehow I felt secure instead of so hysterical. And then I was banging on the toys and squeezing them, and then the top fell off, and there's this phallic symbol, and that was Daddy. And I banged it until it fell apart, and then that sort of satisfied me. But Mommy wasn't there somehow. Daddy reminded me that he was possessing Mommy. And so I threw up all of the milk.
But did you?
Yes. I threw up all of the milk as my rejection of Mommy who rejected me.
It's true?
Right. And I threw it all up, and I was splashing in it, you know, searching for Mommy in the milk somehow.
Oh, no.
And I then was crawling up, you know, hysterical, Mommy, 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 crawling off all fours, off stage. And I went around, took a shower, got dressed, came back, and was in back of the audience, and they were still waiting for me.
Did you yell "Mummy, Mummy"?
Yes. So
to the audience?
Yes.
Did they have to say "Mummy"?
I gave them a container of milk and a little barf bag. Everyone in the audience.
It was like a primal on stage, a precursor.
He started the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because my guy, I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, quote, "It's not available to me." I said, "What's not available?" He said, "Those feelings are not available." So I just kept it and kept. Were you there, Morey?
No, I've heard about it though.
You knew the guy though.
Oh yeah, I used to live with him.
No, come on.
Dan Smokey, yeah.
You used to live
In
with
Palm
him?
Springs, yeah.
Jesus Christ. Honest to God?
Yeah. This is when we were in conventional therapy.
Okay, so anyway, I pushed him on it and he said, no, we were sitting in conventional therapy. And he's sitting on a chair, and all of a sudden he fell off the chair, right flat, and started yelling, screaming, "Mommy, Mommy." 30 minutes went by.
The cream is
And is that old?
might be old, yeah.
It looks funny, but that's all we have.
No, there's another one.
Frozen?
Janov.
Sure, would it be easier if we
Anyway,
move this? There.
when he
Okay.
came out of it,
Okay, it's beautiful.
he touched the carpet and he said, he kept going like that. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "I can feel it." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I don't know, I can feel it." And I said, "Holy shit, that's pardon me."
No, it's good French.
Marathon walk. And so then I tried it, we were out in the desert, I tried it on the cowboy. Couldn't believe what he was saying. And he said, and the same thing happened. The same thing happened. I tried it 20 or 30 times. I thought, oh my God, this is something. However, it took me 50 years to figure it out. The neurology and the biochemistry and stuff. Now I figured it out. The result is here. These are my staff and my friends. And they, from what you did, they have benefited. And they have changed their lives. And that's what you've done. To thousands of people.
Thousands, yeah.
Thank you.
If you hadn't done it, I never would have thought of it. But you had.
I read all of your work.
What he did is he took the first primal. He did the first primal. And all I did was follow and figure it out. Figure out the brain stuff, you know. You have no idea how far it's come. Way, 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 you know.
I was going to talk to you about some later research of mine. I went out to Colorado and studied at this Rocky Mountain Healing Arts Institute. Did a lot of body work. Got Ralph. And also studied rebirthing, and also studied at the Noriega Institute and the yogic breathing techniques and so on. And I was interested in combining it with the whole idea of the Aboriginal concern for inner visioning as part of a sort of connecting up with the powers in the universe and so on, and sort of liberating myself into all of this sort of stuff.
You're already liberated,
And
aren't you?
well, I'm still.
Did that change you, that thing on the stage?
Well, yes, absolutely.
That's what's interesting.
What did he say? I'm sorry,
It
Raphael?
That it changed him on the stage.
On the stage.
Really?
What he went
Oh, yeah.
through on the
Experience.
stage
It was
changed him.
because when I was doing with the performance, I just have a sense of what I should be doing. I make some general sort of structural markers, and then I'm going to perform within those markers and sort of release myself into those stages, from coming in calmly and calling from mother, and sort of like going from the more rational, logical, lucid, and regressing into the more infant sense of loss and so on, and the chaos in there, and releasing it. And those were the steps. I came in closed, with a nice jacket and holding my books coming home from school and calling for my mother. Before you know it, I'm throwing the books and screaming, Mom, where are you, Mom?
This is your story.
No.
It's the stage.
This is the
No,
stage.
but I'm saying it's also,
Yes.
Oh, this, yeah.
What happened?
Yes,
it's also true.
yes,
It's based on his life.
Huh?
It's based on his life.
It is true.
yes, that was my experience.
Right.
I always sensed somehow that my father was taking my mother away from me. When I was an adolescent, I promised to marry her.
Amazing, huh? It's amazing.
Raphael, you were talking a little bit earlier about the tradition of the cathartic experience. I
Yeah,
kinda
this is
missed that.
the in a sense the foundation was that I was a student at Pratt.
Where?
At Pratt Institute
yeah.
in Brooklyn, and I was really interested in finding an art aesthetic that was more rooted in my sort of history. Bless you. And so what I then understood, for instance, that I have a grandfather whose mother was Yaki, whose father was Irish. What a combination. They said it was a bow and arrow wedding, but and so in that search, I
Versus
then
a
came
shotgun
across the
wedding.
whole, first of all, the peyote ritual. And so I then went through that initiation, and that already created an unbelievable breakthrough, because there was also a release within that.
There was.
And I sort of found myself drifting from myself, and saw myself rising, and all sorts of events occurred in vision. And I found also that it wasn't so intellectual, it wasn't so abstract like this laying down and talking. Because I was also at that time part of the experiment at the Sullivan Institute.
What was that?
They wanted to talk to artists. They wanted to get the sense of how artists think. And so I volunteered. And I was there talking to a therapist about the way I think about my art and so on. And that also led me into a deeper sort of level of what I was trying to reach for. It was some reconciling that was just more than intellectual, that was felt, that was body felt.
Were you an actor at the time?
No.
Never. How'd you get on
You've never
stage?
used this before.
I chose it, and it was part of the Destruction in Art Symposium in London in 1966. And there were all sorts of different events that were happening. I
Were
said,
you with R.D. Lang?
Lang is very important.
He was a pal of mine.
Wow.
You were with him. Did you know R.D. in London?
We talked. I mean, he was there for the African at the Africa Center. He did a talk. It's a small world.
You know who R.D. Lang
Oh,
is?
of course.
Yes.
You guys know?
Oh, yeah.
You all know? Oh my God. What a bunch of intellectuals. He gave a lot of drugs to a lot of people. LSD, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I stayed with the peyote.
Yeah.
How was that? How was that?
Yeah.
Oh, it was wonderful. We used to go down to the beach and go through the circle, the drumming, and
You know.
that whole sort of initiatory process, and then we would share, and we would do what we felt was happening. And there's a lot of very sort of emotional body feltness in it.
How did you make a living? What were you doing?
I was teaching in elementary school. I was teaching art to little people.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, people.
I want to ask you something. When you were on peyote and doing all this,
Peyote. You want some more guys?
did you ever cry?
Morey?
Oh yes,
Did you ever have a primal?
of course.
You did.
A number of times. And it was
You
always
did?
levels. It was levels.
What do you mean?
Reaching for more and more of primalness. There were levels. It was like crashing through layers. And what seemed to me like a real breakthrough, and then suddenly it was like a conversation with some voice that said, "There's more to do." Kind of thing.
That's interesting.
What do you make of that?
I think it's amazing
It's
that
very
that
interesting.
that some of the experiences, including what happened on stage, have so much primal elements to it,
Yeah.
and that it was almost like he was like a self-discovery of what the process really turned out to be, but he was sort of naturally following that instinct, and there's a lot of just clear primal elements to it, like the whole idea of levels that you just mentioned.
When I was studying the bringing together all of these things, like what I studied in the meditation and all the breathing, the fire breath and all that, and when I studied with the rebirthing and sort of seeing that there were a lot of pieces missing everywhere, and somehow if all these pieces came together, the breakthrough, the primal, would be much deeper and more profound, and actually experientially within the imaginativeness of the one's relationship to the regression. In other words, going back to even just to outline it, what I did is I discovered when I was being Rolfed that when they worked on certain Golgi organs, I found that certain muscle groups relaxed and other muscle groups got tightened.
Yeah.
And I saw this change. Suddenly it was like, instead of this collapse, I suddenly felt this kind of openness. And for me, that was a very physical thing. And so I developed this idea of a balloon between the legs, laying down a balloon between the legs and squeezing it, and holding that squeeze so that you exhausted the muscles, and the nervous system then began to assert itself, and you got this shake in the legs. Then it was a question of moving it up. And so I would work on Golgi areas, and then suddenly would release into the pelvis, into the chest, and the person was having a Kundalini experience. Right? And then
We should try that. We should try that.
Right.
and then what I would suggest is find a mother 10,000 years ago, right? And the imaginative process released like that, the nervous system sort of, it's like the person would find a mother and place themselves in her belly. I would say, place yourself in her belly. And they would place themselves in that mother's belly. And then I would have someone working with me with pillows pushing on the person you're being born on each side, pushing on them. And they would experience, with all those contractions, they would experience a birth in that time. And I would say, live in that time and gain all your strength you can from that time, and then come back and tell us about
And they
it.
would.
Yes.
What's amazing is Raphael had videotaped this, but it became the subject of his dissertation, which he completed in 1982.
Oh.
And developing this not as a therapeutic clinical process, but as an artistic practice, and that he's continued to do over the next decade.
Yeah.
But before that, when you were doing it, were you doing it as a therapist?
I wasn't. I always was being an artist, but I saw the artist and the art process is creating that kind of integration, that kind of search into a deeper sense of self. That seemed to be defined in all sorts of ways by Grodek, he called it the it, and by Freud, who called it the id and the shadow and so on. And then in the Aboriginal culture, that's very common. That's what you're reaching for and you're integrating. You know, and I was thinking like with the sun thing, you know, the hang there, and finally have that release.
No, I want to ask you something. Did you know about Art's book?
Yes,
Not
yes.
before, not before.
No.
No,
when
it was
came
after
out.
then someone came over to me and said, is this you?
So when you read it, I
Yes,
assume.
yes.
Then didn't you want to do Primal or see what it was like or what he was doing?
Well, I was so busy primaling.
So you never.
But I did want to meet the person that wrote that book.
This is almost 50 years later. It's 40 since I wrote the book.
Yeah.
1967.
I did want to meet the
Almost
person
50
that wrote
years.
that book.
Yeah.
And I
But
felt
since you
it
were
was-
also sort
it
of
was brilliant.
working in this line of ideas and you didn't want to go and say, okay, I'm going to go and do Primal, basically.
Well, but that's the point. That was part of my doing,
Was.
primaling.
He didn't
So
have
you
enough
were
time
doing-
to
you
go
were
do
doing
Primal
it.
because he was doing Primal. That's what he was saying. That's what he's.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't see it as clearly as you saw it, but for me, it was all locked into the whole Aboriginal idea for self-realization, which is physical. It's not this abstract intellectual.
Right.
That's
Very interesting.
Yeah,
That's
which
very
is the
interesting.
basis of the
First line?
therapy.
Would
That
we
this is
equate
not
it to
an
first line?
intellectual therapy.
Yeah.
Well, I
This is
think
a.
what, yes, exactly. What David's saying is like, what's interesting is that he's taking the traditions and philosophies of Aboriginal people or Indigenous people and following that rather than the intellectual track of university-trained psychologists, and that's how he got onto it.
That's right.
That by using another whole world of way of looking at life and
Experiential.
yes.
Yeah.
rather than
Exactly.
intellectual.
That's how he hit on it, and he just got to it from a different route.
That's right.
And so then when the patient shows up with art, the two schools meet.
But I never
Right,
would have done
right.
if I hadn't heard that guy,
Right.
that patient, I never would have done it. Never.
It wouldn't have opened the door.
He
Yeah.
opened the door
All right,
to 50 years of new therapy.
He opened the door to the limbic system,
right.
Yes.
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 Absolutely.
Yes.
to a different brain
Yes.
system
Right.
to do
Absolutely.
therapy with.
I was sort of the
However-
amygdala and hippocampus and the
Right.
limbic.
However,
Exactly.
he was getting very unhappy with the psychoanalysis, knowing that this was only the top part and that there must have been something else. But I did not know how to access it until it happened. Then that's when he said, well, I knew there was something there. Now I'm going to forget the rest and follow that road.
He just, in other words, call mommy.
Right.
You don't talk about, you have to have your mama, No, call mommy. It's so simple.
Right.
That's
He
Well,
gave
you
you
know-
the direction,
And that was
and you
straight for
flew
you.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the more details that Raphael offers about the actual show and what he did on stage, it's just the more primal it sounds, because there's so much of the need that he was looking for in the milk, and the symbolism of what represents mommy and how he wanted it, and searching for it just on this gut level, crawling around,
Yeah.
things that are very, that
That are
patients
primal.
sometimes do.
Totally
But
primal.
but he was
yeah.
in
That are
diapers.
primal, right?
Say it again.
He's in diapers.
That's right.
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 On top of it.
Do we have your films? Could we see films?
Unfortunately, that event at the Mercury Theater wasn't filmed or documented, which is unfortunate. I was just so involved in the process. I didn't say I have to make sure I have somebody,
We have to have you
Right.
give another performance
Yeah.
and
Right.
film
Because-
it.
Wait, did the audience actually start calling mama?
Just a few.
Just a few.
Most of them were very, distant.
And when did anything happen with those people who called mama?
I didn't follow up on that.
Did they cry?
That's what I didn't follow up on. I know that some of them drank the milk and some of them did some little regurgitating and stuff and said mommy sort of quietly. But the idea of releasing totally like the experience you had. I didn't, other than myself experiencing it, I didn't see it out there.
Did it change you when you did it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you combine that primally and that primal process, and then you combine it with peyote, you can imagine.
Do you have any in your pocket? I want to try.
Right.
No, well, remember, I used it when it was legal. I just sent it down to Florida to a botanical garden, and I got a whole box of buttons when it was legal. So you can get as many buttons as you
It's
want.
not legal anymore?
No, it's not. But you could. The Church of the Firstborn. I really explored that. And but you have to go onto a reservation. The Church of the Firstborn uses peyote instead of the wafer.
I'll tell you a
You have to
similar.
go on the reservation?
Yes.
Where is it?
That's where it's legal.
Where is it?
Any of the Christian sort of Aboriginal, pulling together.
In America?
Yeah, in a reservation.
We should do that.
I'll tell you an interesting anecdote.
I'd like to.
I forget the year, but it was before I even knew the book The Primal Scream existed. Or never heard your name, and I had taken a large dose of LSD.
Mm-hmm.
I was about 18. I think I was a senior in high school.
Old Timothy Leary.
I ended up on the bed of my girlfriend crying for mommy for
Did you really?
I don't know how long. Just crying and crying and crying. That was the experience I had. I came out of it and I felt a little better, but I had no idea what had happened. About 2 or 3 years later, I ran across the Primal Scream and I said, this is what I did. This is what happened. And that was my entree into therapy.
Really?
Yep.
Amazing. Amazing.
You just blew the
May I
gates.
call you Raphael?
Of course.
I have a couple of questions. When you put on that performance, number one, were you on peyote at that time?
No.
And what was the impetus? What was the idea to do it? And what were you experiencing inside? In other words, what you said was that you had a couple of sort of general ideas, and I'd like to know about that process, going from the general ideas and then getting into the performance. What was that like for you?
Well, I think it was say there's a combination of a lot of it is pieces of it are written here and there, but you find it central to the Aboriginal culture. That idea, it's got to be a physical thing. You've got to. It's like a pilgrimage into some deeper, profound sense of self, and within it you have, in a sense, a consciousness of the fact that we tear apart food, we chew it, we digest it. There's a destruction, construction thing that's always going on. It doesn't sort of remain intact. It sort of falls apart and becomes integrated. And so, and the Aboriginal culture, that's then brought into the more sort of social reality. That's how looking at nature, looking at these processes in nature of creation and destruction. And the idea of integrating had to then involve that combination of processes. I had to then find a way, an initiatory process within which I could break through into that more natural sort of processes of creation and destruction and find that integration. And because we look at the tree and we see the tree and we see the leaves, but there's so much creation, destruction. It's like it becomes obvious, like we sit around here, even if you're a vegetarian, you've got to kill lettuce and you've got to chew it and digest it and so on. Each breath, they say in the Kundalini breath, each breath creates and destroys the universe. So it's within that sense of self that simply to sit down and to think, with our latest stage in evolution with the prefrontal development, there's 7 million years of our evolving, from the chimpanzee brain that kept building on to finally what becomes sapiens sapiens. That, to ignore all of that 7 million years of perception and experiencing and cognition, see, to go back and capture it all and have it be a revelation for the prefrontal rather than the other way around, where the prefrontal then sort of dictates to it.
So the idea of wearing diapers came from where?
Well, that's part of the regression.
But so you knew that you were going to wear diapers on the stage.
Oh yes, I had the ritual worked out. I had the steps. I didn't have all the details worked out, but I knew that the diaper was an important key, something concrete.
Right.
Otherwise, it would have been another abstraction.
So part of your performance was was planned, and part of it was improvised
Yes.
based on what came out of the
Right.
planned
Right.
art.
What do you, oh, plans.
Yes. So,
Yeah,
so what was the process of the improvised? In other words, you were
The
calling.
emotional release into it.
right.
In
And
other
what
words, I had
followed from
that
that.
was not planned, but I knew it was essential.
Was it different every time you were performing, that release?
Good question.
Well, there were different performances. I didn't repeat. In other words, I wouldn't take a performance and keep repeating it. I had to see that each performance was going a step further, or I found that that performance didn't take me a step further, and so that I had to find out what behavior, what that didn't occur,
Right.
and
Right.
what would within the ritual, what would make that possible.
And what was
Interesting.
that usually?
Sometimes it was a very subtle thing. I mean, an example, I had to deal with my marriage. I had to deal with, whatever impact it had on my pursuit. And I found that there was certain sense of consciousness of my relationship to my wife that kept me at a more intellectual level, and that I had to avoid the more sort of ancient sense of emotion and relationship. I mean, in simple kind of sense, I could say like my id. I had to keep it under control. I had to keep the relationship in harmony and so on. And that process itself becomes a barrier. Okay? And so then I involved my wife in one of the primals.
Oh, sure. Tell us how.
Yeah, she had, and the primal was she had a wedding gown. We put the wedding gown on her, and she had a bouquet, and she came in to the audience with the wedding gown, and then I led her to an ironing board, and I gave her some of my underwear to iron, but I told her when you iron it, you have to burn them. Right? And so she burned all my underwear, and the place was smelling of all this burned clothing kind of thing. And meantime, there was some eggs tied between her legs underneath the wedding gown. And I crawled underneath, and I took an egg out, and I brought it out, and I gave it to someone in the audience, and I told them, beat it. And again, the conceptual of beating the egg. So they broke the egg, and they had the fork, and they were beating it on the plate. And I went underneath and I took out another egg. Meanwhile, she was saying, I am the happy wife. I am the happy wife. While she's burning all the underwear and everything. And hanging them up, you see the burned holes in them. She hangs them on the line, kind of thing. And then I'm busy crawling underneath and sort of following her along and being dragged and pulling an egg out and giving it to the next person in the audience.
And what did that symbolize?
amazing.
The pulling of the eggs, the pulling them out, giving the
Well,
audience. the
it's this
beating
whole
of the eggs.
issue of birthing and what is the relationship at some ovular level.
Okay, I see. And she's the happy wife who's giving birth and doing the
But
laundry. I
which
see.
of course is all an illusion.
Right. Right.
See?
So was your wife an actress as well, or what was?
Well,
tell us about her a little bit.
she was born in Germany. She had studied dance and came here to study with Martha Graham. And she studied some voice. And we met. She was with a performance group. We met at a museum where I was with my performance group, and she was with hers. And we were sort of changing into costumes and stuff, and I saw this beautiful lady, at the end of the room, and I said, I have to know her. And so I went up to her, and I immediately said, I'd like your telephone number. And she didn't argue with me at all about it. She just gave me the number, and I told her I was on my way to Europe, but when I came back, I wanted to be with her. And she had doubts about it, and when I came back, I called her, and that led to our marriage. We lived together for a couple of years, and talking about a lot of these things.
Are you still married?
Performance. The cancer took her away.
Oh.
This year.
This year.
Yeah.
Just this
In
year.
You were married
May
all your life
18.
with her.
Yeah, over 20 years.
Oh my.
Yeah. And I work a lot of the release with her. You know, she wanted to be cremated, and I have her ashes, and I have a kind of altar, and I do release with her.
You talk to her?
Yeah, I do release with her, actually.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, you read the real emotion that is there within that is a chaos of feeling that intellectually we can sort of detour, and so the idea is to bring it back and reach down into the, you know, the it is there, and you're it's like educating the id to be in this place without deconstructing us really.
So you cry?
Oh, yeah.
Strange. It's very strange.
Very interesting.
You know, you mentioned at the beginning when you first mentioned your wife that in working on the marriage that was some sort of barrier to you to getting into the physical primal feelings in a way. But I thought maybe it was because your wife was not part of the artistic world, but she was.
Yeah.
So, but still, it was you were referring to sort of the day-to-day working out a marriage.
Well, what wife would cooperate unless
another artist wife.
Happy wife.
Yeah.
well, she was willing to take on that challenge.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
What was her name?
Monique.
Oh, Monique.
And she was from Germany?
She was, yes, born in Germany. Her mother was from Romania and her father from Poland.
So it was Monica, probably. Originally.
Yeah, right. And then they,
Right.
on her license, they, like I'm
Monique.
Raphael, and on my license it says Ralph.
Oh, right.
No, I was thinking of it as like
Welcome
a bar.
to America.
Yeah, exactly.
Ralph.
My social security card says Gus.
Is that right?
No.
It says
Really?
Gus Gurza, yeah.
August. Oh, I see. Yeah.
So Morey was asking you about how you sort of developed the ideas, but I was wondering at the time that you did it in 1966, was there anything else like this being done anywhere? In other words, was there like a...
Well, there was a group, not that kind of thing, but there
Yeah.
was a group working with small pieces of it. Excuse me.
I like that music.
I do
Yeah.
too.
It's okay.
You're right.
It took care of itself.
It was also the living theater in those years.
Absolutely. And I knew them.
And I did too. And
Yeah.
That was.
In New York?
Yeah, and they were everywhere.
Oh.
They caused a riot in France when they went out in the street. They carried the play into the street
Oh.
and became a
No
riot.
kidding. And it became a riot in the
Yeah.
street.
Yeah.
In France?
Do you know about the living theater?
No.
In
I wish
France?
Yeah.
Was
But
this
you
the
knew them,
Fluxus movement?
Huh?
The Fluxus movement?
No.
Okay,
Flux
something
was
different.
long after that. This was way before.
Before.
And again, it was physical theater. It was, yeah, they were.
Was it Molina?
Yes.
Oh my God, this is
Yeah,
50
you got it.
years ago.
Yeah.
Molina and what? Or the other one?
Melina, as soon as you say that, I know. I know.
There was a big troop of wild people,
Oh.
and they took their play out into the streets.
And they all did physical things with it.
Yeah.
Physical things.
It almost sounds
what
like
kind
a
of stuff did they
precursor
do?
to performing.
Well, it wouldn't just be
Right.
like talking
Yeah.
to you. It would be like
Sorry.
making contact with you. It's sort of like.
They wanted a revolution. They would create
Yeah.
it in the street. Real
And they
revolution.
did open up the theater
Yes.
in many
Yeah,
ways.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I
Amazing.
guess I was mentioning the people, they call them the realists, the new realists in France. They were doing things like showing crushed automobiles, and
That was Chris Burton's stuff.
right,
Yes.
and there were people who were chopping things up and things like that. But again, always with this distance.
Yes.
See? Always with the distance.
And it was not emotional in their case.
Right.
Like Chris Burden and all that. It was more like the spectacle and the outside
Okay.
looking into things. How they,
Someone told me
but
he
it was
applied
not
for
emotional.
my therapy, by the way. I forget, in New York
Oh,
or
is that
somewhere.
right?
Yeah.
Chris
What
Burden?
did you say?
Chris Burton.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not sure.
That he did therapy.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, he needs.
But you should tell them a little bit about what we do, because it's very, very different in a way. How we go down.
Well, Raphael may not know that Morey knew that original patient, but she's now a therapist with the center.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Yeah,
we
50
lived
years
together
later.
in Palm Springs.
Did you?
Yeah. This is when you were doing conventional therapy.
Is it really?
Yeah, before you moved up to Los Angeles. Yeah.
But didn't he start doing primal in
Yeah,
Palm Springs,
yes,
I thought?
Yes.
Right.
No, actually,
Seeing the first patient, quote, was that in
did you
Palm
did
Springs?
you see Denny
Yeah, it was in
Palm Springs?
Yes.
Or-
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then you saw somebody else. And then you came up to Los Angeles and I was the third one.
Were you?
I was the
Jesus,
third
no
person to
shit.
have
Honest
a
to God?
primal. And you were, I had no idea what you were talking about. And you were
Or
talking
what you were
about,
doing.
I didn't either.
I had
what you were
no
doing.
idea. There was something about feeling. I didn't know what feeling was. I had no idea what feeling was.
What did I do?
Primal. Well, it was in a group. It was in a
Feel it.
group setting, and I had quit cigarettes, and I had been taking my one-a-day amphetamine, which
my
I
God.
which I stopped taking, and I felt really very agitated. And you caught something, and we were in a group setting. And you asked Steve. I said I had something about how comfortable I was when my boyfriend would rub my back. And I guess I must have made some kind of motion. And you had me lie on my stomach, and you had Steve rub my back, start rubbing my back. I'll never forget this. Wow. And all of a sudden, I felt like Steve's hands were my father's hands. And I could feel this thing coming up inside of me. And I started needing to roll. And I rolled and rolled around the carpet and was screaming.
Really?
Yeah.
Screaming what?
I don't remember. It was a total physical release. It was just a total physical release. It was something that was triggered by the sense that my father was rubbing my back, which had been triggered by Steve doing it. I remember that scream, rolling around and then just coming up and just feeling so incredibly relaxed and feeling present and feeling in the room and being able to see people. And it's like I knew, and this was your third patient, and I knew you were onto something.
Really?
I knew you were onto something. Yeah, it wasn't even cathartic. It was like coming into myself. The scream allowed me to come into myself and be myself and be present and breathe naturally and be with people. It was
But you were young, right? You were like a
28.
kid. Oh.
28.
We've been together 50 years.
Wow.
50 years.
Yeah.
40 years.
Right.
40 years.
Yeah.
40 years.
Right.
We've been married 40 years.
Yeah. And so then it was a group process, and then people started getting triggered and having feelings, and Art was taking notes and talking to us, and we were telling him what our experience was. And from that came the book, The Primal Scream.
So, Morey, that first session that Art writes about with Danny, that happened in Palm Springs?
That must have
Yeah,
happened
yeah.
in Palm
Oh, it did
Springs.
happen.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know
Right.
that.
And nice guy.
Terrific guy.
Sweet,
Oh, yeah?
Terrific guy.
gentle.
And what happened to him?
He had a heart attack. Man.
That's what I heard. He had a heart attack later.
How long
I
ago?
heard that when after he left me, he gained a lot of weight. I
Yeah, I mean, he was too frightened to go further with the therapy.
Yeah.
I
Is
mean,
that what it
with-
was?
Yeah.
So he was a young kid at
This
the
was
time?
the
Yeah.
patient that
He was a
had
young
first
kid.
patient, right?
about his performance? Is
Yes.
that-
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Yes.
what
Right.
his
Yeah.
name was Dennis. I called him Danny.
So when you say it was cathartic for you, what I'm interested in is what the experience inside
Well, I'm
was.
using cathartic in a different way.
Okay,
Okay, I'm not using cathartic in an intellectual way.
I understand. Yeah,
So
but the
that-
experience when you were screaming out, "Mommy!" Did you know you were going to be doing that?
I had an idea of the challenge of getting to those feelings of my father taking my mother away from me.
Okay.
See, and that.
How
and
did he do that? What happened?
Well-
Figuratively,
No, but
symbolically.
did
Yeah.
they get separated or it's just...
No, well, this is not. the notion of reality, where it begins and ends, is a big question. The thing is that there was a feltness deep in me that that didn't have language or expression, that had to do with my father taking my mother away from me. You know, and I was especially angry when I heard them making love.
Oh, you heard them?
Yes.
It's usually very traumatic for a child.
Yeah.
Very,
Yes.
very.
So all of that's why I said that I'm better than him and that I'm going to marry her. And she'll have a better life with me.
Interesting.
Probably true.
How old were you?
I was
when
about.
when you go back into
Listen,
the
I was reading
experience.
Havelock Ellis when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
There were books, and it happened accidentally. There was a bookseller in a like a cart on the end of the street where we lived, on Henry Street on the Lower East Side. And I used to go and shine shoes, and I used to make, you know, a couple of dollars kind of thing. And I used to hide the shoe shine box under the steps because if my father knew, he would punish me. Because he says, you know, you deserve better. You know, you're not a stick kind of thing. You know, this whole kind of thing. And so I had a couple of dollars. And I walked through and I saw these books piled up there. It's like they called me, you know, and I went over and I looked through the books and I read all these interesting things about the psychology and pathology of sex. I said, wow, this is like a dirty book. You know?
Let's read it.
And so I bought the volumes, the 3 volumes,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
hid them underneath my bed and I would read them at night. And always my father would come in and he would say, that's going to make you crazy.
Interesting.
What'd your father do
What did he do?
for a living?
He was an elevator operator. Yeah, my mom was a sewing machine, you know,
So
operator,
you're
sweatshop.
You're working class.
Yeah.
It's funny, huh? You know, that's important that he's working class, you know? That he was not up there.
Right. Exactly.
It's a good
And I
point.
think, and me too.
Good point.
I was a ghetto
Yeah.
kid. I
Mhm.
Not
lived in the
totally.
ghetto.
Yeah.
Lived in the
Right.
ghetto.
Right. Very real place.
I grew up over here in the east side.
Mm-hmm.
His original, actually went to see his original home in Boyle Heights.
They took it
Because
away.
well, it's there, but
No, it's not. It's a little wooden shack. How could it stay?
because what they did was they built out.
Oh, is that what
Yeah,
it is?
I went back and looked at it. They tore down the front shack. So his family was Jewish from Russia,
Mm-hmm.
and in that little Boyle Heights area,
important.
that was a Jewish enclave
Yeah.
in LA, and then a mixed Jewish Latino enclave.
The lower
There's also a
Lower East
student
Side
ghetto.
where I grew
Yeah.
up was
The old man
Russian
used to-
Jewish.
That's where we
No.
lived.
Yes, I was the Shabbat Goy. And even in the temples they called me. They all knew me. Meanwhile, I'm the kid who's the Catholic altar boy. Right?
Really?
My wife's father was Jewish, Polish, and they hid him in a Christian
Your wife's
family.
father? So-
Yeah,
They hit him where?
they hid him in a Christian family.
Oh, I see.
Due to the war.
Yeah, of
Yeah, in
course.
Poland.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
Germans,
yeah.
yeah.
So they wouldn't get him.
Yeah.
Jesus, what a
What a
background.
story. It's amazing.
So did your parents stay together?
No, my Portuguese father was one of these motorcycle guys, and he was always with some woman on the back of the motorcycle. And a woman one day came to the door and knocked and said that she was in about her 9th month. And she said, "Your husband is the
Oops.
father of my child." So my mother, talk about primals. She went to the closet, took all his. We lived on the 5th floor of a walk-up on the Lower East Side on Henry Street. She went to the closet and threw the window open, started throwing his clothes out the window, screaming, "Get out! Get out! Get out!"
Then she felt
And
a
all
lot
his
better, I'm
clothes
sure.
was flying down. He ran downstairs to try to catch sort of that image. If I had that on video, it would be just unbelievable.
How old were you at the
did-
time?
I was, let's see, about 5,
Oh, that
4.5.
Did she leave then, or it was just a big?
No, that was it.
That was it. She
Oh.
left. So
No,
you-
he left.
He kicked him out.
Kicked him out.
left. So who raised you then, her or him?
No, she did.
She did.
Yeah. And then she married a couple of years later to Joseph from Ponce, Puerto Rico, fishing family.
So were you raised there in Puerto Rico?
No,
New York.
New
It
York,
was New York?
in Manhattan.
Oh, he came
Lower
to-
East Side,
yeah.
Russian Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. I was the first Latino, That's when I heard things like "There Goes the Neighborhood."
The title of a Willie Colon album.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing, huh? Interesting.
And how'd you get along with your stepdad?
Not too well.
Mm.
You know, he was taking her away from me also.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Did you still have a relationship with your father after that?
No,
No?
no, I was really angry at him.
Oh, did he not try to get in touch with you?
My mother wouldn't let him come near.
Really?
And not only that, I was in love with one of my cousins from that side, and I wasn't allowed. We couldn't associate in any way with his side of the gene pool.
Right.
To keep you away from the cousin.
And even later on,
Yeah,
when you were an
that was a
adult?
little traumatic for me to lose my first love.
I bet. And then when you are an adult, did you ever meet with him again after that? Or you never
No, he
saw him
died.
again?
He died 2 years after that in a motorcycle crash.
Of course.
Oh, yeah. So you never really knew your father much.
Well, I just remember these shoes when they were in court for the divorce. He had these light tan shoes, very shiny, and that was where I was always looking. It's because he never wanted me to look him in the face.
Oh. So you have to look down.
Talk
Right.
about a primal.
Why? I don't get it.
Well, ask
He didn't-
Raphael.
It's a challenge. In the primal world, when you look someone in the eye in that primal world, it's a challenge.
You're confronting them in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at their feet, you like you are subservient. You're
Yeah.
just like,
With the chimpanzee, they always
Yeah.
look away
that's true.
until the hand is touched. Then you can come into that space. So in the underclass, there's a lot of that. They call it the respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very primal.
And that's why the Mexicans always say, "What are you looking at?"
Really? Really?
Oh.
That'll start a
but-
fight just like that. You look at somebody the wrong way.
Respect and control.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No.
we see that in films. What are you
It's
looking
the
at?
alpha.
Exactly.
It's the alpha psychology.
But you were in court with them when they were
Yeah.
going through the divorce. They brought you into court.
Yeah, I was supposed to say something, and you know, I have a feeling it was the time when the adoption was taking place that he had to surrender the children to her new husband,
Oh.
Joseph. And I think the question was, who do we want to be with?
Oh my.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
That's one sister, yes,
Younger?
younger. And I always had to police my friends for not dragging her off somewhere and fucking her.
She very pretty.
Yeah.
Very pretty, very cute, very sweet, but it's the underclass neighborhood. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
You're protected.
And all of
There's
my
a girl
friends
around.
were either, you know, most of them were Italian and Irish, and you know, from my Catholic sort of connection.
Hot blood.
Right.
So were you tall as a kid as well?
Oh yeah, sure.
So there's a little intimidation there, right?
No, we still got into fights.
Oh, still.
Yeah, we got into fights because there were brothers who always fought together against me,
Oh.
kind of thing. But we became friends. I mean, it's like.
So what do you do now?
Now I am a distinguished professor at Rutgers University in the School of
No.
Fine Arts.
No.
That's terrific.
What do you teach?
Fine arts.
Fine arts?
Yeah, I teach theory and self and expression.
Are you a painter or you draw? Or
I do performances. I just did one at the
Performance.
Hirshhorn. I play the piano
Oh.
with an axe.
With an
Oh, yes.
What?
I've read about
the axe
yes.
on the piano keys?
On the entire piano.
And the piano survives at the end, or
No.
what happens?
It goes into their collection.
It's called a smashing performance.
It's a performance.
Oh, it is. I
Yeah.
did one at the Whitney. Monique and I did a lot of performances around the world together with the piano as part of the process, and a lot of regrets and stuff. I used to use fairy tales and stuff and children's nursery rhymes to try to get this more infantile kind of thing. But and I'm concerned with the sound. I'm really interested in the sort of life and death process. The piano represents, in a sense, that kind of organization, finally, of civilization that we then need to adjust ourselves to in order to have some important relationship with. And so I want to deconstruct all that.
So you play piano?
I played piano a little bit when my sister was taking lessons. I used to take her every day, and I used to hate that. Every day she'd be dun 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 dun. And then finally I was able to play a little piece of Brahms, a little piece. And then when I was involved in see, you have to understand, I grew up in a neighborhood where on the corner there was a deserted building. And there was a big empty lot. And when people move out of these buildings, sometimes they throw furniture in the empty lot part, and it's all piled in there. Well, I used to hang out with a few friends, like about 4 or 5 of us. We used to climb over the fence and see which of us could break the most windows. Right? And then I used to also then jump on the furniture with a few of them, and we'd tear it apart and so on. And one day I saw a piano down below, and I jumped down there. I was the tall one. I could hang down, and I got a big pipe and started banging it. So whenever I talk about my art development, I say, well, that's where it began. That's where it began. So there are all sorts of psychological, web, but there are all sorts of behavioral processes, and that they reinforce each other and they disappear into each other. And that's what has to be reached and broken down. And so the whole idea of being a destructivist, as an artist, I chose that as my identity.
But how did do you have a PhD?
Yes,
In what? In arts?
in fine arts,
In fine arts.
and the teaching of fine arts.
I know nothing about this guy. It's
This is
incredible.
amazing. What are you learning now?
Yeah, I'm learning this.
Well,
Right.
how did you go from that environment into the academic world? I mean, did you get a degree right away, or?
I just, you understand, I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish Russian neighborhood where the kids, all these young people wanted to be somebody. They wanted to be a teacher, a dentist, a lawyer, somebody. I used to spend my summers in East Harlem. My mother felt somehow I would enjoy myself playing with my cousins. Meanwhile, they all belonged to gangs. They all had zip guns. They used to go into the basement and kill rats or squirrels in the park, chase somebody, desperately running, crying, and throw bottles at them. And if they caught them, beat the crap out of them. This was my 3
Summer
weeks,
escapade.
my 3 weeks in the summer with my cousins. Then I would go back to the Jewish Orthodox neighborhood, peaceful. Notions of accomplishment, something has, education, very critical. And so what happened is that this tension was kind of interesting. Fortunately, I spent most of my time in the Jewish Orthodox cultural sort of expectation, and not amongst my cousins who were all dropouts, and they saw becoming a gangster is really important kind of thing. So I let go of that. When I used to visit them, I used to talk about books I was reading and stuff, and they used to say, "Shut up," That's like the man's culture, stuff like that. So I let go of that entirely, and I chose the cultural expectations in the Russian Jewish Orthodox community.
Now you're a doctor.
Amazing.
He's
Amazing.
now a doctor. Incredible. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
The
it's
evolution
really
of
interesting.
people.
Yeah. And what makes it happen?
influence,
What
right.
makes you take each turn?
Yeah. I mean, I got support from a couple of teachers. I was the artist of my elementary school.
Oh,
At holidays, I used to go around, like in Thanksgiving, I bring turkeys on all the blackboards, with the pilgrims. I know better now. And I began to understand these pilgrims, I don't know, what kind of Thanksgiving. They spend all their time trying to kill the indigenous.
That's right.
that's right.
So, it's just sort of, I always, thank God. I see, and if you want to ask me about what God means, it's not any conventional idea. I think that all the conventional ideas are part of the problem.
Of God.
Yes,
Among other things.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, all of those prophets who had their psychedelic insight, there was no real primal, no real breakthrough. You go through the Bible and it has nothing to do with, that revelation through that integration that you would then name God. God doesn't make judgments. God doesn't have that kind of consciousness. Well,
God does not punish.
I'm working on a
Right.
paper now on consciousness,
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Well,
and I'm dealing with God. Seems to be a very critical break. You have to get past God. It's very important.
Amen. Amen.
Touche. Yes,
You have to get past God.
that's right.
What's the old Jethro Tull song? He's not the kind you have to wind up on Sunday.
Really?
Yeah. God.
Wait, say that again, Dave.
He's not the kind that you have to wind up on Sunday.
Right.
I would leave the he out, but
Okay. Fair enough.
What was it John Lennon said, that God is
a
a
concept
concept
by which we measure our
by which
pain.
we measure our pain?
Well, that's when
Yeah.
he was in Primal.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's what I told him.
Yeah,
He
actually, I
said to
told
me,
him that.
well, what about God? And I said, blah, 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 theory. And he said, oh, it's a concept by which we measure our pain. I said, yeah,
There
that's
we
it.
go.
Yeah.
And then he wrote this great song about it. Right?
yeah.
So tell us about your concept. Well, I mean, actually, consciousness isn't really a concept. It's beyond that. But I'd like to know what you feel and think about consciousness.
David?
There's a small consciousness and there's a big consciousness, and the big consciousness embraces 7 million years of consciousness, and once you embrace that, then you move on to billions of years. I mean, it's like understanding, for
Because that's the
instance, that in
camera.
galaxies there are networks that are like the way synapses form networks, and that it's within that notion of consciousness that the consciousness is not syllabic. It's pre-syllabic. It's what you call a behavioral mem, sort of, rather than an intellectual, syllabic-rooted intellectual mem.
Right.
It's about
No words.
behaviors.
Yeah.
It's about behaviors, and you've got to start. If you want to see the picture of it, you literally have to go back through each of our species models and see how they, in a sense, got lost in their, without realizing their potential, and had to then disappear. You know, as you go from one species to another, you see that their cognitive potential was literally destroyed by the culture that they created, which put into concrete what their potential is. The shamanic taboos, all the taboos. What a taboo does is it makes it difficult for you to reach inside. It keeps you out here. And so you if you go back and see how the chimpanzees, how the alpha culture exists, and how they treat each other, and what behavioral mems are dominant, that then become very powerful conditioners within taboo. So that's you can then associate that to parents that are very abusive and punishing. That deep conditioning is what we forget. We accept. It's sort of like in a situation. What is that syndrome? When you're a prisoner of someone, and
Stockholm.
the Stockholm
Stockholm,
syndrome.
yes.
Oh, yes.
Right.
yes.
We're all locked in the Stockholm syndrome. We have joined with the oppressive, and we defend it because that's our sense of identity. As long as we stay on the surface, that's our sense of identity.
That's a good point.
And
That's
so it
true.
becomes
Yes,
imprinted. It becomes imprinted and unconscious.
Yes,
Is
it
that right?
becomes
That
it becomes
Norm-
it
Who we
becomes
are.
synaptic.
Right.
It becomes a
Right.
synaptic pattern because synaptic patterns are addictive. And so you can't just surrender it intellectually. You can spend all your time trying to surrender, somehow solve it intellectually. It has to deconstruct in a psychosomatic way.
That's right.
So because that's
And that's what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we do in Primal.
Talk about it.
Explain that. 'Cause you
I'm not sure I can.
You should-
We take people, we usually start in the present with something in their life that is bothering them. A lot of times we will get patients who come into therapy and the motivating force is some crisis in their life at the present time. And classically we will start there with something that is hurting them. And we will follow, they will have tears, let's say, about that. And we will follow the tears. The tears becomes that vehicle, if you will, for which we allow or use to help a patient to
The same feelings
this.
earlier.
Thank you. I was just right.
Yeah.
Those similar familiar feelings that have been triggered to earlier pains in their past that are similar to the pain you're feeling
resonate,
now. That resonate. And they lose the cognitive parts start to dissipate, and they are literally, I think, physiologically, they are traveling to another portion of the brain, from the left to the right, and then down to the limbic system, to the right side of the limbic system, where memories of past trauma and past pains that are similar and familiar to the present feeling are then
Hippocampus. Yeah.
hippocampus, amygdala, which now become the feeling, right, the memory and the fact and the feeling of it are located and start to become available and accessible for more crying, for more feeling,
More release.
and start to become conscious.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Which gives rise to insights.
Thank you. Right, which gives which become connected, and that gives rise to insights about how present behavior has been influenced and determined by past events, past traumatic events.
And by the need to repress it.
By the what?
And by the need to repress
Yes.
Right, right.
it. Which then becomes all the
Okay.
diverted behavior, so I will never go back there because that hurts too much, we can't feel it. So then that's how we become someone else, basically. Because it
And
has to be repressed and we have to act it out, we have to cover up, and we have to become someone else.
Okay. What if it isn't covered up?
Then you're in pain.
What
You
if
suffer.
What if it isn't?
Actively.
What if it isn't covered up, and what isn't? It isn't repression. What if it's a pride in who you are? That identity, because it's so psychosomatically rooted, that you must defend it. Your life depends on it, because that's you feel in your flesh, in your bones, any attempt to deconstruct it.
Right. No, I
I'm not sure
understand.
what you're
Well,
I
this
think
is
I
why,
understand.
human
that
beings are always at
the
war.
memory may not be. Well, the fact of it may not be, of what happened may not be repressed. You remember it and then you defend against it.
Exactly.
But the feeling of it is repressed.
The
You're
pain.
disconnected from the pain of it. You're so busy trying to keep that pain at bay and in a way overcompensating
Right.
by elevating it to a prideful
Right.
something to be proud of.
But it has to be challenged
yeah.
for that process to occur.
It has to be
Yes.
challenged.
Yeah.
That's right, because
Yes.
it is a defense
Yeah.
Yeah.
against the
And
feeling.
it has to be
what we
challenged
do-
carefully, or somebody will swing at
That's
you.
true.
Yes.
That's true.
Or-
Those
or they'll
defenses
go
are not
crazy.
taken.
They'll go
exactly
crazy
right.
if
You're
too much
right.
pain comes out.
Or,
Yes.
yes.
And what
Absolutely.
Franz and David are saying is that what this leads to is a kind of unconsciousness. The person becomes kind of unconscious.
Well, I call
So-
that the synaptic addiction. You've got a synaptic patterning,
Yes.
which then you're addicted to, and you have to, by challenging it, you're then challenging that synaptic pattern,
Yes.
and that's where it becomes dangerous and has to be done
Yeah.
very carefully.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right, because you're
Exactly.
starting, in your
You're
words and
opening
what
up.
you're talking about, you're starting to deconstruct that construction that they have made to keep their
Which they
their
defend.
integrity,
The
What is
network
that?
of
their
defense.
systemic integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, until death. So when you go down to the original context, and you take the pain to where it started, and you feel the pain even down into those very early birth feelings or in utero feelings, then you're feeling it in its original context, which releases, and at the same process, you're releasing the energy from that pain,
Yeah.
which then opens you up to becoming who you are, which is more conscious person. And as you do this incrementally, you really become more conscious.
And you have to create that kind of trust.
Yes.
Excuse me, guys, I'm
Yes.
gonna lie down.
The number
stay.
one,
You sure?
the number one.
Stay.
Let me go with it from there.
Is he okay?
Just have to write down.
Well, he's going to go to that appointment I told you about later today. He's got the doctor appointment a little bit later.
Yeah.
Because of this is sort of like aftermath of the surgery.
Yeah.
But he feels like he didn't recover properly from anesthetic and all that. So, although he was pretty bright.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
but
Yeah,
he
it's
gets
just-
tired.
He gets
Yes,
tired
absolutely.
fast.
Tired
I
from
understand.
that stuff,
I understand.
and then the throats begin
So there's like 3
Yeah.
surgeries in what, like a month or
in
something?
about a
Yeah.
month.
Yeah.
So it was tough. This last one really knocked him out.
But your point about being careful not to have the defenses too head on too quickly, because you can get a sock in the face, or someone could start to
Yeah.
to
Go
go
and
crazy.
escape someplace.
Right. Or have that bring on a secondary defense, like the hitting or the lashing out or
Or
whatever.
another
form-
creative narrative.
Right. In order to, like,
Yeah.
a symptom to keep down. So that's why we've learned over time that, because in the early days, I think defenses were not appreciated as much as they are now for their power. That they're there for survival,
Exactly.
and they had to be back then, and that hasn't changed now. So they're pristine in their effect and in their structure, and it's why we now recognize that therapy takes time. It's not a instant coffee, if you will. As you know, it takes time and it takes patience, and we do it. We try to do it without skipping steps. By that I mean step by step. Addressing what's there, the lesser pains at first, those that can be more easily integrated at first, so that the process can become integrated, so that later pains, those earlier pains that are larger, had been more destructive, the system can integrate them better, if you will, because there's a step-by-step methodology now to the process, so that we're not taking people too deep, too fast, where things can't be integrated. The watchword that we use is that this is about connection. At its base, it's about connected feelings, not indiscriminate, just grabbing any feeling you can and throwing it open. That it's taking what's there and going from there.
Well, I think
What's the most accessible?
Yeah.
What I think is interesting, and the emphasis that you place on the physical, which is sort of the cornerstone of what Art did in psychology, because he took it away from the talk therapies where you sit down on a couch for an hour and talk to somebody,
Yeah.
see if you can work it out by talking about what happened to you. And he realized that the physical was an essential part of what was going on with you, so that the disturbance wasn't just in your mind, it was in your body as well. And so when he started doing the primal stuff, he got rid of all the furniture in his office, because he realized that people were breaking the furniture down. It was a little bit like what you were doing on stage, right? With the destructive
but
part
my
of it. Right.
sculpture is the breaking up of furniture.
Right, exactly. And so he removed it all because he said, well, it's like they're going to break it anyway. And I think that was sort of like that's an important connection between what you were doing and what he hit on, in terms of which direction to take therapy, to understand that it's not an intellectual problem, it's not a problem of the mind, it's a problem of the whole person.
Yeah.
And yet in the rooms, what we call primal rooms, where there is no furniture, there's a mat laid down. I had many years ago a patient, just recalling it from what you were just saying, what you did on stage, who as a child, the mother, something with dinner plates, where she would force him to stack them or do something with them. And so I brought in a stack of dinner plates. And he just destroyed them in the room. He was so angry at them. And then at the end of that
Good
destruction,
performance,
the tears came. The hurt feelings of what that meant to him, what she had done to him by making him act that way as a child. And so there's a case of taking something that was real from his background, bringing it into the room, having him address it, the thing he couldn't do back then.
Well, I imagine that he probably broke a few dishes and got punished really bad.
Yeah, there you go.
And so it's sort of like you put the cup there and you're told if you put it there, it's going to fall.
Yeah.
So you don't want to call her a liar.
Right.
So it falls, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to ask you on that destruction symposium that started this whole thing in '66. How did you get invited to that?
Well, I was doing all these furniture destructions
Oh, I see.
as my thesis and my
yeah.
MFA,
For what school?
Pratt Institute.
Oh, the Pratt Institute.
Yeah, what happened was that I was already writing papers about the whole idea of how destruction and construction is built into, just who we are and our history and being. And so I then started putting flower pots together and smashing them and pouring paint on them and stuff and putting layers of paper towel and digging into it, sort of like archaeological kind of unconscious, down to the Rorschach-ian sort of blots and stuff. And then I wanted to sort of get more involved in a less constructive, and so I found things that were made already. And for me, the cushion that I was sitting on, right, I couldn't go out on the floor to buy all sorts of things, and so you talk about a room becoming empty. And I'm sitting on this cushion, so I take it, that's my first piece. I take it all apart and I bring it in to the professor, who fortunately was very understanding. His name was Richenberg. And he would let me talk about it and things that I'd read and so on. And all the students would be like scratching their heads, what is going on here? Because I'd burn it, I'd, put acid on it and so on, because we had etching and stuff, so I had all these materials. And that was the first piece.
The couch.
And
the sofa.
the cushion.
The cushion.
And then I said, well, my thesis is coming up, I'm going to need at least a dozen pieces. And so next I looked at this chair whose cushion I used, and I felt, well, there's my next piece. But I developed a ritual relationship to that process. Meaning that I was releasing that this piece of furniture, like the cushion, that's where it happened, the realization that when you sit on something, your aura, we're bioplasmic. And so the aura it syncs itself, it becomes part of the place we are. For instance, a psychic, so-called psychic, quote unquote, after you leave can go to the chair and say, a man sat here, age, give some sort of sense of history, because the bioplasmic field, like a tape recording, has information on it.
Like a
And
trace.
we leave, right. Very much like what animals follow, the scent kind of thing. So for me then, it was within that ritual, I was releasing that boundness to it on the one hand. On the other hand, I was releasing that piece of furniture back to nature that it was taken from. Right? Instead of chairness of the chair is the woodness of the chair and the cottonness of it and the wireness of it.
Deconstructing it back to its original.
Exactly. The joke was that someone would come along and say, are you ever going to put it together again? I mean, I would argue now that the chair will do that itself.
But only if it wants to.
Exactly. That's, and it probably doesn't want to. Not in the same way. It would have to be. It will become something else.
Right.
So that was then my next piece of furniture and my next piece of furniture, and slowly my room is emptying out. Right? So then I had my exhibit, and I didn't have any furniture in the house. The last piece I did was a mattress that I slept on. And I took that down to Coney Island to the beach, and I put acid and I burned it and tore everything off, and I soaked it in the ocean by a jetty. I dragged it in and I put some stones on it because I thought water would be a baptism of some kind. Right? And I kept it there for about 3 weeks, and then I swam in, and this was Coney Island when people were there, right? And I swim in and I pull out this mattress that's all soaked like a dead whale, and I bring it up to the beach, and everybody's gathering around. I think that was my first performance, maybe. Everyone's gathering around, and it's the water's all sort of pulling off it, and I'm pulling, some of the more springs out and a little more separating, and it had some of the green tint when something is in the water, kind of with salt water. Yeah, and I loaded it on 2x4s, and I asked one of the guys there, and I said, if you could help me, and I had my station wagon pulled it right into the station wagon. Brought it to my studio, and I turned on a few heaters so it would still drain and sort of get a little dry enough to bring in for a crit. This is working on my thesis, a critique from the faculty.
Okay, thank you.
So I brought it in, and it started having the smell of when I burned it, a lot of fire to burn it. It had that smell of burned mattress.
Yeah.
The kind of smell that you say, where's the fire?
Right.
Right? And I brought it in, and I stood it out in the hallway. But the first part of it, I should mention, I had it downstairs. I was living in a 2-story home in Coney Island, about a block away from the old fun house with the revolving thing and the big clown.
Oh, yes.
Right? I think it was called Steeplechase Park. It's been a while. And I had it downstairs leaning on the wall. I'm shaving upstairs in the bathroom, getting ready for class, and I see these people carrying this mattress to this garbage truck. Big open garbage truck. Like in the first week of the month, you leave furniture out and people
Yes.
Right, evidently they thought someone...
throw it
it
out.
turns out the people who lived downstairs said the people upstairs had a fire on their mattress and you should come and pick it up. Right?
So you had to run out and salvage it?
Running out in my underwear, half shaven, and saying, stop, it's a work of art. Right? And they were all looking at me, this kind of lunatic.
Yeah.
A work of art.
They call the police.
Well, I convinced them to put it back. Right?
Wow.
I said, I'm an art student.
Yeah.
Right?
Reality
And
is
then
an
I put it,
illusion.
absolutely, I put it in my station wagon, took it to Pratt, was going to get a crit for that piece. Each piece had to go before the faculty, and all the students were there going to do a critique.
Was it still wet, by the way?
It was partially, but on the outside it was, because I had
Had to
some
be
heaters.
heavy.
Yeah.
Was it pretty
well,
heavy for the
well, it
water?
was a mattress about this size. It
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
a double, kind of thing. And I was able to make love on a small mattress. But anyway, so I put it on against the wall
There's a joke
outside the classroom, and talking, and then Richenberg says, "Bring your piece in so we can, look at it, and you can tell us about it, and we can talk about it." And I went out, and I saw these firemen, with the fire hats and stuff, carrying the mattress down the hall. And so I'm yelling,
Hey!
"Stop!" It was like with the truck. "Stop! It's a work of art!" And they didn't stop. So Richenberg came running out. He ran up to them. He said, "It's a work of art." They believed him.
Oh.
They believed him. They carried it back, and then we brought it inside, and I got my critique and so on. And that mattress, I had a gallery at the time. I had a show with that piece in it of some other furniture pieces. And Hulsenbeck, one of the founders of Dada, saw it. And he spoke to Alfred Barr, who was the head of the MoMA at the time. He said, "I see there's an artist here whose artwork you must see. He's where Dada should be."
That's great.
Right? Because he was a psychologist, a poet, who was on Central Park West around the upper 60s. He was practicing therapy, doing therapeutic process. So he understood the whole idea of, not catharsis in the abstract, but within release, right? Because I wrote something about that idea of releasing the spirit connection and the constructions, so on, physicalness of it. And Alfred Barr came down to the gallery, looked at the mattress. He said, "We need to have that in our collection. I'd like to bring it and have the board look at it, and I'm very confident that it'll be in our collection."
At MoMA.
At MoMA.
Yeah.
So he was down there. I was down in the gallery, and he grabbed one end of the piece. He said, "Right now, we have to take it right now." So the gallery person said, "I will donate it," right? And so him on one end, he's the director of the entire museum, the first and very important director. I'm on one end, he's the other. Put it into the station wagon. He gets in, I get in. We drive to the MoMA, there are people that are expecting him, and so they come out, and he says, no, and he grabs it and carries it in with me instead of letting the guards do it.
That's amazing.
We lean it up against the big elevator, freight elevator. He says, I'll be in touch with you in a couple of months, and you'll know exactly. And so I was pinching myself and yelling all the way in my car. I screamed like unbelievable. I laughed, I cried. It was just unbelievable affirmation.
Yes.
And obviously,
What year was this?
That was in 63.
So 3 years before.
Yeah,
From
but
a
that-
garbage.
that's how the word got around about you.
yeah. That
And
piece
they
in
ended
the
up-
MoMA.
Because my original question was, how did you end up getting invited to the London Symposium?
Well, there was a lot of it. Then I had a piece. The Whitney called me and they said they
Oh.
wanted to have a piece also. And then I got a piece into the Whitney collection.
So it all started building
yeah,
from
it
there.
just exactly. And I was in the Young America, so that was another show
Oh, I see.
at the Whitney. Then I had about 4 or 5 pieces. And when I got my piece into the MoMA collection, suddenly I was some sort of hero.
Oh.
I mean, the students would, good show, I mean, I have the feeling he was saying, we didn't expect you, crazy person, to end up with
How did
work
they
in a
display that
MoMA
mattress, do you
collection.
remember? How did they display the mattress?
Oh, it was just upright right there. Beautifully done. There was a guy that used to come around dressed in a white sort of like a toga, holding a lamp up, and he would say, where is the truth here? Where is So that helped.
I mean, the mattress was standing up or against the wall, or could you walk
Standing
around?
up, standing up.
Oh,
I
hung.
put
Oh,
it
that's
I
great.
put it on a frame,
Yeah.
hangs on the
bolted
wall.
it through the back, the wire springs through the back,
Uh,
and so it's this sort of nice framed,
nice.
and it's
Does it sit there by itself, or is there?
it's hung on the wall.
No, I understand. I understand that. My question is different. Does it hang there on the wall by itself, or is there an explanation for what it means to you that accompanies it, or is it just you leave it there by itself for the spectator to,
Yeah, it just has
to
a
just
title.
interpret?
Just has a title: Archaeological Find Number 32.
And that's it.
That's it, with the date and the materials and stuff. And then when they do people go around giving a lecture talk, then there's some information.
That comes out more so.
And now they put it on tape, and you get the earphones and you walk around. So, and you generally get an explanation if you follow the program from piece to
Have
piece.
you heard it? I mean, does it give an
Yeah,
explanation
no,
that you?
No,
that you-
they think my explanation is too complicated. So they give a simpler version
Okay.
of it.
It's still there?
It's right now. It's in the Hirshhorn exhibition, where I did the piano concert, where I played the piano with an axe.
Because one of the things that always frustrated me about certain art pieces, and more with the contemporary ones, was that I wished when I was watching them that there was a more in-depth, something I could read that was more in depth of what the artist's inspiration or what they were trying to say or what the symbolism was, so that I could understand better what I was looking at and what to look for and at. Not so much as just to narrow my focus, but to give me an idea so I could broaden my focus.
Right, but
And it
that's
seems-
the problem. Most artists don't know what they're doing. And they write,
Well-
and they write is another work of art they're writing. It's another poetic, sort of introverted kind of process. It doesn't really reveal what is being reconciled and how they're reconciling.
Because when you talk about it, the way you talk about it, it seems like it's a laid out. You've got a whole. There's a reason for.
I know the steps.
Yeah, you're talking the steps that led to this final.
Yeah, to any of my work, I want to be lucid. I want to be
Yeah.
introspective, and I want it to be with an intellect.
Right.
Right? In other words, arriving at it where I can write it in a way that has some fluency and people can have insight.
Yeah.
But most artists
That's what I would-
don't have that discipline.
I thought that was the purpose. Okay.
You know, they don't. I know. I work with graduate students who don't. If I say, "What's your narrative intention?" They'll say, "What?" What? Give me an example. You know, tell me what visual language is operating here.
That's what I want to know as I'm watching a piece.
And they'll say, well, I like red.
Yeah.
You know, and the Lucia color test makes clear when you say red, there's a whole narrative, there's a whole psychology, there's a whole behavioral underpinning to it, but that's not what's taught within art programs, within art curriculum.
Why not?
Because then they say it's therapy. And I would argue there's no such thing as anything being outside of that frame.
Isn't part of the idea or discipline of art is to inform? Or am I'm not an artist, I don't know.
But you are an artist. You dream 4 to 6 times a night.
Well, that's true.
Touche. I like how you say that. Yes, right. Yes.
You are an artist. And how do you gain introspective insight into that and become sort of, in a sense, lucid within intellect? You have to do the whole therapeutic process. But artists within their education do not do that. It's just behavior. And you appropriate pieces of that behavior and you put together pieces without insight. You just say, I like this, I don't like that, I prefer this, I don't prefer that. It's a very shallow way to...
I was going to say, yeah, what you're describing seems to be this idea of like taking things on whims rather than a deeper structural...
I tell all of my students, I say, get thee to a really fine therapist.
Yeah, good.
If you want insight into what you're doing. Yeah, but if I wanted to have that kind of insight, I would have become a writer. You can't argue with that. It's like there's a lot of resistance right there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of writers with that inside too. So,
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So there's an important part missing to an artist's education. Like I was explaining, you know, when the Sullivan Institute came to Pratt and they were looking for students to volunteer to get involved in their therapeutic process because they wanted to understand how the mind of the artist worked, I raised my hand and, you know, went running towards the Sullivan Institute to become part of their program. And guess what? Within all of that talking, I was behaving. So that was the fortunate thing. Being an artist, I was doing all of that behaving. So it wasn't just intellectual. But whenever I did speak of it, I spoke of the action of it, right? And I worked with a really fantastic therapist and then went into analysis, you know, like twice a week to 4 times a week. And I was with him, I think, longer than Woody Allen was with his therapist.
Perhaps in your position, you can bring more of, teach more of that to graduate students.
I do. Mostly the undergraduates are more malleable. The graduate students are convinced they know what everything, you know, what it's all about. And,
that's interesting.
but I can influence somewhat those that are willing to, in a sense, open themselves up more to ideas and I'll work with them. I'll be their advisor on the thesis, and they generally, by the end of their thesis, have much more insight into the things we're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I have to prepare to get you back to LA.
Mm-hmm.
This has been great. Great conversation.